Shalom. I am so excited that you're here, and we'll be discussing the process and planning of Aliyah. You are watching this, so obviously you are thinking about Aliyah. Maybe you're thinking more in the long term. Maybe you're thinking in the short term, whatever it might be. Maybe you're just examining different possibilities. Whatever the case is, we're going to cover a whole bunch of things related to the process of Aliyah, as well as basic planning for Aliyah. We're going to be covering a lot of ideas. And the good news is, if I go a little too fast, you're welcome to watch this as many times as you want. But I just want to start off with three things. First of all, when you are ready to move forward with your Aliyah plans, you're going to be assigned an Aliyah advisor. That person will be in touch with you and will be able to guide you in a personal way through the process and through the planning that we're going to start discussing. So that's number one. A second thing is, as we move forward, like I said, there's going to be a lot of information. I might talk a little bit quickly, but I'll be making reference to resources from our website, and you're welcome to follow up for further research with those resources. And lastly, I want to say that you're welcome, of course, to contact our office directly. You can find our contact information on our website, and there's an 866 number, a toll-free number. You can reach us. Our offices are here in Israel. By way of introduction, my name is Weiss. I'm an Aliyah advisor here at Nefesh. I've been working for Nefesh for just over 10 years. I've been assisting Olim with their Aliyah process. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. My wife and I made Aliyah just over 11 years ago with our 5 children, and it's been wonderful being able to live our dream here in Israel. I look forward to being able to welcome you when you come in the right time. Before we begin, we have to, of course, appreciate that anytime you're going to be moving, there's going to be challenges involved. Certainly if you're talking about moving over 5,000 miles away. So we understand that there's going to be challenges, and we understand there's going to be obstacles. However, I believe that none of those obstacles are insurmountable. I apologize for the double negative, but I think it brings the point across. It's a matter of being able to appreciate the challenges and be able to plan for them. So we're going to speak about some of those things as well. And the last thing I want to say before we actually get started is that if there's a chance that you would be making Aliyah within the next 12 months, if there's a chance, I want to encourage you, as soon as you're finished watching this webinar, that you go to our website, and in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a button there that says Apply. Click on that button and complete an online application for Aliyah. Again, if there's a chance that you're within 12 months of Aliyah, I encourage you, submit that application for Aliyah, and we'll be discussing that also in just a moment. I like to tell my Olim that there's two sides of Aliyah. There's a procedural side of Aliyah, and there's also the planning aspect of Aliyah. And people say, well, which is more important? The process aspect, the planning aspect? The answer is they're both kind of the two sides of the same coin, and they're both critical. We're going to explain each of these things throughout this discussion. The process, when we talk about the process of Aliyah, we're talking about things like the actual nitty-gritty, the actual steps that are involved, which we'll be going through, the rights and benefits, those things that you're able to get from the state of Israel when you make Aliyah, your Aliyah eligibility, the ability to make Aliyah, whether you are eligible for it, which we'll discuss, and finally, of course, the documentation, those things, those documents you will need to procure in order to complete your Aliyah processing. So that's the procedural side of Aliyah, which we'll be discussing. And on the planning aspect, those are things like where you'll be living, how you'll be supporting yourself, if you are going to be in school, or if you have children that are in school, researching those aspects, and also about healthcare. There are other aspects of Aliyah planning as well that are important to research, and we have separate webinars that discuss those. As I mentioned originally, this is going to be somewhat of an overview of the process, and we'll only be touching upon those things that we just mentioned here. So let's begin with the Aliyah process. The Aliyah process, people think, well, it's very quick. you don't have to do that much. The truth is, you're right. You're not that far away already from Aliyah, but there are steps involved, and it does take time. And that's important to be able to appreciate. First and foremost, as I mentioned, you need to fill out an application for Aliyah online. And make sure you complete the entire application and submit at the very end. And if you're within 12 months of Aliyah, you'll be assigned an Aliyah advisor who will be walking you through the process. I have a lot of people I know that are very nervous about submitting an application for Aliyah. They think it's kind of like they're going over the top of the roller coaster. You know, as soon as they click submit, oh, that's it, we're making Aliyah. The truth is that you are always going to be in a position where you have the choice as to whether you want to make Aliyah or not. You can complete an application and still decide to push off your plans. You can go through the process, have an interview with the Jewish agency, as we're going to discuss, and still decide if you want to push off your plans. You could even get your Aliyah approval. You can get your Aliyah visa and decide that you want to push off your plans if need be. That's okay. You're never going to be in a position where you have to make Aliyah. But as I mentioned, if there's a chance you'd be making Aliyah within 12 months, it's better to start the process now. I'd rather you be in a position where you're ready to make Aliyah and then you have to push off your plans than the opposite to be the case. That all of a sudden you decide we got to get to Israel by whenever it is so the kids could get to school, or because you have a job waiting for you, and then you find out that you have another few months worth of bureaucracy waiting ahead of you. So if there's a chance that you'd be making Aliyah within the next 12 months, submit that application online. So that's the first step. Once you've submitted the application, the next step is going to be collecting documentation and uploading it to your online portal. It's the coolest thing. Once you've submitted an application, you're going to have your own online presence, a portal that you'll be able to access. You'll be able to see all of the documentation that's required and be able to upload scans of your documents directly to that file. We'll discuss the details of the documents soon. After you've submitted, you've collected and uploaded those documents, then you're going to have your interview with the Jewish agency. Now, the Jewish agency is the Israeli government organization, the government agency that oversees Aliyah from abroad. Anyone making Aliyah from North America is automatically working with two organizations. Nefesh B'Nefesh providing the resources, the guidance, the information, the assistance, and the Jewish agency handling the bureaucratic side of things. They're the ones that actually approve your documents and actually give you the Aliyah approval when the time comes. So part of the process of Aliyah is to actually meet with the Jewish agency. Sometimes you're able to do that in person. Generally, you're able to do that by Zoom, depending on what's easier, given your situation where you live and your schedule. Either way, you will be showing the Jewish agency representatives the physical documents that you've collected. Even though you've uploaded scans, you'll have to show them those physical documents. You'll have that interview. And once you've had the interview, collected and shown them all the documents, depending on different circumstances, it usually take a few weeks for you to get your notification of Aliyah approval. That's going to come in the form of 2 emails, basically saying that Mazal Tov, you've been approved for Aliyah. And one of those emails is going to have the instructions for the final step, which is to get what's called your Aliyah visa. Aliyah visas are placed into your passport. If you're making Aliyah with the whole family, that means everybody in the family will be getting as well an Aliyah visa. The Aliyah visa takes usually about another 3 weeks to get, depending on where you live. And once you have the Aliyah visa, at that point, you're good to go. At that point, the next flight you take to Israel, you bring all that documentation with you in your carry-on. When you arrive in Israel, they're going to stop you when you get off of the plane. They'll direct you to the Aliyah processing offices. And about an hour later, you'll be walking out of the airport as Israeli citizens with Israeli healthcare. So that's pretty much the process, the overall nutshell of Aliyah. I know we made it seem very straightforward and very simple, and in a lot of ways it is. There are a lot of things that need to be taken into account, which we're going to discuss right now. First of all is going to be the basic Aliyah documentation that you need. Now, we actually have an article about this on our website that outlines it. And the reason I say the basic Aliyah documentation is because the documentation you need to submit may change depending on your individual circumstances. So we're not going to be going through all the different possibilities, but we're going to be talking about the major ones that generally everybody has to submit. Number one, you need to have a valid passport. That's a U.S. passport, a Canadian passport. If you are a dual citizen, if you have multiple citizenships in many countries, then you may need to have passports from those countries as well. However, most importantly, if you have an Israeli passport, you'll need to have that with you in order to get your Aliyah approval. When we talk about valid passports, it means that not only does it have to be valid, it can't be expired, but it also can't be expiring within the next 12 months. So check the expiration date on your passport. If your passport is set to expire within the next 12 months, or during the course of your Aliyah processing, if it will be coming into that time period that it'll expire within 12 months, you should look already into getting a renewed passport so that doesn't become an issue. Everyone in the family needs to have his or her own passport, of course, with the same requirements that it be valid for at least another 12 months. You will need to collect civil documentation with something called apostilles, which we'll talk about in just a second. The civil documentation you're going to need to collect, number one is you'll need a birth certificate. Now, the birth certificate is what we call the long form birth certificate, which means it doesn't only have your name, it also has the names of your parents listed as well. It's very important. If you were born in a foreign country, you will need to reach out to order a copy of an original birth certificate from that country. If you are married, you need a copy of your civil marriage certificate. Anyone who is divorced or widowed or widower would need a copy not only of the marriage certificate, but also of the divorce decree or the death certificate. If a person was married numerous times, married previously, they would need marriage certificates and divorce decrees or death certificates for each of those marriages. Now, those documents need a special authentication called an apostille. Now, people get worried when we hear about apostilles. Apostilles are like the scourge of Aliyah documentation. How do you get an apostille? An apostille is an international authentication. Some people like to say it's a notary on steroids. Basically, it's a way that in Israel, they can tell that the document that you're submitting is authentic and that the signature is not forged. So the apostille is authenticating the signature that's on the document. If it's a document that originated from the United States, then generally the apostille will be issued by the Secretary of State in the state in which the document came. If it's a document from Canada, depending on the type of document, generally it will come from Global Affairs in Canada. It may come from other offices as well, depending on the type of document. There are companies that you can hire that will take your document and get the apostille for you. It costs a little bit more, but it'll alleviate some of that stress and some of that runaround, depending on the situation. So those are important to know. And lastly, if you have a document from abroad, from overseas, the apostille will need to come from that country. This especially is so if one has a birth certificate, as we mentioned, from another country, or some other examples as we're going to see in a moment. You'll also need to get a criminal background check from any and every country you lived in for a year or more after age 14. So if you're living in the United States, that would be an FBI background check. If you're living in Canada, it would be an RCMP background check. And if you spend time in either country, or if you spend time abroad, you would need to get the background check as well from the country where it applies. The background checks also need an apostille, just like we mentioned before. In Canada, it comes from Global Affairs. In the United States, it comes from a special office that authenticates federal documents, and that's actually in Virginia. Be aware that the background checks for Aliyah purposes are only valid for 6 months. So this is an important consideration when we talk about your timeline for Aliyah. If your plans are to make Aliyah further away than 6 months from now, then hold off on getting those background checks done because they're just going to expire. You're just going to have to do it again. Understand, of course, that once you get your Aliyah approval, if you hold off on your Aliyah until after 6 months from getting the background check, you'll still have to get a new background check, but your Aliyah approval will still be valid, as your Aliyah advisor will explain. There's also a form called an affidavit of personal status, which is an affirmation of one's marital status and any previous marital statuses. That document also needs an authentication, either to be notarized and apostilled, or it can be signed at the Israeli consulate and get a consular stamp. The important thing about the affidavit of personal status is, just like the background check, it's only valid for 6 months. So keep that in mind with regards to your timing. There's also something called proof of living outside of Israel, which is something that shows that your main residence has been outside of Israel for the last either 7 years or more, depending on certain factors, which we'll discuss. And also there are additional forms required by the Jewish agency. So there's something called a health declaration form that you fill out on your own. There's something called an entry-exit form where you log your trips in and out of Israel over the last number of years. All of these things will be explained to you, and there may be other forms as well that are required given the situations. The important thing to know is that the civil documentation that we described is good. Once you get it, it doesn't expire. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, divorce decrees, death certificates, those types of things, they don't expire. Only the background check and the affidavit of personal status have that 6 month time limit. Now, one thing that I skipped on purpose, and we're going to come back to it right now, and many of you are probably thinking, why did he skip that? I wanted to save it for the very end, and that's something we call proof of Jewish lineage or conversion. What happens is that anyone who wants to make Aliyah has to fall under what's called the law of return, which means that a person needs to be Jewish, either through lineage or through conversion or through marriage. And therefore, when one is looking to make Aliyah, they need to provide proof of that Jewish status. Now, a lot of people get very upset. They say, why do I need to provide proof of the fact that I'm Jewish? And I always reassure people, this has nothing to do with religiosity. This is entirely bureaucracy. Because, like we said, it just is there to show that a person is eligible under the law of return for Aliyah. So this could be a number of different things depending on a person's status. It may be as simple as a letter from a synagogue rabbi written on synagogue letterhead, indicating how the rabbi knows you and that the rabbi knows you to be Jewish and of Jewish lineage. It may be, if one is a convert, then it may be as simple as showing a copy of the conversion certificate, providing information about the process and the procedure of conversion, plus a letter or two from the rabbis and a personal letter. However, in some instances, it may require additional documentation. So, for example, there are some people who were born in the former Soviet Union and Soviet bloc that may require additional documentation in proving their Jewish status. This is because there's a special office in the government, the Israeli government, called Nativ, which handles the proof of Judaism status for those from that country. Just because you were born there does not mean necessarily that you'll have to provide that extra documentation. But if there's a concern, if there's a possibility, if you were born in and around the former Soviet bloc, then you should submit your application for Aliyah sooner rather than later, just in case there's extra documentation you may need to provide. So let's move on. I mentioned before about Aliyah eligibility and whether one is eligible for Aliyah. So that sometimes scares people. What do I mean? What are you saying? I might not be eligible to make Aliyah. So let's understand the following. When we talk about making Aliyah, we're talking about two things. Number one is getting Israeli citizenship. And the second thing is getting your Aliyah benefits, what I like to call your door prizes. All of those benefits that the state of Israel gives you when you've made Aliyah. Now, there are some people that may already have Israeli citizenship, but yet they're still eligible for the Aliyah benefits, and that's when we say they're still eligible for Aliyah. So what do we talk about then? What are these different types of Aliyah statuses? Well, the most simplest is what we call an Oleh Chadash. This is someone who has no prior Israeli background, in that they don't have an Israeli passport. They were not born in Israel. When they were born, neither of their parents were Israeli, and they're now becoming Israeli for the very first time. There's also, though, someone called an Ezrach Oleh. An Ezrach Oleh is someone who is born outside of Israel to one or two Israeli parents. Now, since Israeli citizenship is passed to first generation, that individual, whether he or she knows it or not, is already Israeli, and by law has to have an Israeli passport. But in those cases, number one, if you think you fall into that status, if one of your parents, at least one of your parents, is Israeli when you were born, and you were born outside of Israel, if you don't have an Israeli passport yet, you should also submit your application already to start that process of having yourself registered as Israeli so you can get that Israeli passport. It's an extra step that you'll have to do in order to complete your Aliyah processing and get your Aliyah documentation. But an Ezrach Oleh, as we mentioned, will already have Israeli citizenship, but is still eligible for Aliyah and is still eligible for all of those benefits that we talked about. There's also someone called a Katin Choser. A Katin Choser also already has Israeli citizenship because he or she was born in Israel or made Aliyah with the parents at an early age and left Israel with his or her parents before age 14. And in such a case, that individual for sure has an Israeli passport. It may need to be renewed, but they already have an Israeli passport, and they are also, even though they're Israeli, that individual is still eligible for Aliyah benefit and assistance from Nefesh b'Nefesh. So those are three so far of those Aliyah statuses. Now, there's also the possibility that someone who left Israel after age 15, as an adult, we would say, someone with Israeli citizenship, and as such, they already have Israeli citizenship, and they're also not eligible to make Aliyah, to get Aliyah benefits, because they're already fully Israeli. Now, there may be benefits available to that individual, and they should contact a special office, a special desk at the Israeli consulate called Bayit Yisraeli. I'm not going to go into the details, but there may be some benefits available to that individual as well. However, here's what's really exciting. If that individual who is Israeli, who left Israel, who was born in Israel or made Aliyah at a young age, and left Israel after the age of 15, if that person marries someone who is eligible for Aliyah, and they have a child who is now an Ezrach Oleh, who is someone who's already Israeli as well, but was born outside of Israel, then the whole family may be eligible for something called Mishpachat Olim status. And that means that not only is the parent who's an Oleh or Olah and the child eligible for Aliyah benefits, but even that Israeli parent who would normally be a Toshav Chazer is also given Aliyah status and also be able to partake in some of those benefits. All of these statuses and all of these specifics we'll be able to talk about when you start moving forward with your Aliyah application and you have an Aliyah advisor. But the truth is that the final determination of these statuses is something that's always going to be in the hands of the Jewish agency. And it's always up to them to make the final determination. Now, there's also a possibility that a person can be what's called a former temporary resident. A former temporary resident means there still is actually temporary resident status in Israel. There are people who came to Israel and lived in Israel for an extended period of time on what we call an A1 visa. And while they were in Israel, they had an Israeli identification number. And that identification number, even though it's no longer active, is still in the Israeli system. So when that individual is going to be making Aliyah now, and by all means, that person is eligible for Aliyah, but when that person makes Aliyah, that person will be getting back that same number. And because of that, it affects things like the documentation they may need to submit, as well as the order of the processing that's going to take place when they arrive in Israel. Again, if that's the case, if you don't know if you were a temporary resident in the past, chances are you weren't. But if you think you were, Again, this is something you may want to be able to start your Aliyah application already then. So that way, if there's any extra documentation you may need to collect, you'll be able to be already on top of it and be able to move forward. Let's talk about those Aliyah benefits quickly. And again, I'm just going to touch on them very quickly. We have a wonderful article that outlines these as well on our website. But as I mentioned before, jokingly, that these are kind of like the door prizes you get when you make Aliyah. But yes, these are things that Olim are eligible for. They're eligible for a flight if financially needed. When a person receives their Aliyah approval from the Jewish agency, the approval email will contain a declaration that one would need to submit, but that will be for the flight, the Aliyah flight. The one gets a taxi from the airport, paid by the Ministry of Absorption. You're going to have your basic Israeli healthcare for the first 6 months for free. After 6 months, you're going to pay for it. Now, some Aliyah statuses don't receive that benefit, but for those who are Olim Chadashim, the general benefits are that you do receive that free basic healthcare for the first 6 months if you're not working yet. Ulpan is another benefit that one is eligible for. Ulpan is an immersive Hebrew language program. It's a 5-month program, generally 5 days a week, 5 hours a day for 5 months. And as well, you can always take Ulpan, but if you take it within the first 18, if you start within the first 18 months after making Aliyah, and you attend one of those recognized Ulpanim that are subsidized, then the state of Israel will pay for that Ulpan class. Depending on where you live, there may be other different options for Ulpan, and that's something that can be addressed with your Aliyah advisor, as well as through our resources on our website. There are tax breaks that you may be eligible for. There's an income tax break if you're working in Israel for the first number of years. There's an Arnona benefit. Arnona is a municipal tax benefit that may or may not be available depending on which towns a person lives in, and the amount that one benefits from as well is based on the municipality. Also, currently there is a benefit on tax breaks on passive international income. If you have income coming from overseas, from abroad when you make Aliyah, either investments or real estate or things of that nature. So currently there is a benefit that Israel does not bother you for a certain number of time with regards to having to report for taxes that income in Israel. There's also customs benefits. You're able to bring up to 3 shipments of personal items within the first 3 years after making Aliyah. And Israel will waive the import taxes. You pay for the shipping, you pay for the container, you pay for the port taxes. But as far as the import taxes, those the state of Israel will waive. There are exceptions, and we have a few articles about that on our website as well. There's also tax benefits on a new car, whether you purchase a new car in Israel or if you import a car to Israel. There are articles about that as well. It's not tax-free. If you purchase or if you import a car to Israel. However, there is definitely a tax benefit. It gets a little bit complicated. And again, there are articles on our website you can research, you can refer to. There's also a lower mortgage rate that's available for Olim. There's something called Sal Klita. Sal Klita is flat out money that the government of Israel gives you for the first 6 months or so after you arrive in Israel. If you want to know how much it is, it's based on the size of the family and based on the ages of the people in the family. We have an article on our website with a wonderful number of charts, so you can actually see exactly what the payout is. The initial payout generally is in the form of a debit card in the airport when you arrive in Israel, when you go through your Aliyah processing. That can change again based on your Aliyah status, but normally that would be the case, that your initial payment of Sal Klita would be in the form of a debit card in the airport upon arrival in Israel. There's also a rent subsidy. If you're renting, if you don't own a property yet in Israel, if you're renting for 12 months and your name is on the lease, there is a rent subsidy that kicks in starting the 8th month after you've made Aliyah. We have an article about that as well. And there's also higher education subsidies. If you are, there are age limits there, but depending on whether you have a bachelor's or a master's degree, that Israel may subsidize a bachelor's degree if you already have a bachelor's degree, depending on your age. And when you start, Israel may subsidize a master's degree for you. So these are things that are Aliyah benefits. Again, these are things that we have information about on our website. I encourage you, again, to look at those resources further and discuss it with your Aliyah advisor. Let's go into the Aliyah planning aspect. And we're going to run through this rather quickly. And again, I'll refer you to resources to follow through. But when we talk about Aliyah planning, we've discussed already the nitty-gritty, the details of the bureaucratic process of Aliyah. Now we're going into more bigger things of things like where you're going to be living, what are you going to be doing to support yourself, and things of that nature. We'll talk about community, employment, education, these things that you can see here on the screen. But let's begin with community. Where do you want to live, and what kind of things should you consider when you're looking at communities? So number one, of course, is going to be affordability, as far as whether what type of housing would you be able to afford, given the money the resources that you will have at your disposal when you make Aliyah. If you're going to be working in Israel, what type of income can you foresee? If you're already retired, what type of a fixed income do you already have? And based within that structure, what type of housing would you be able to afford? And based on that, what kind of a community or which community would be the best for you to look at? We like to tell people sometimes that the center of the country is usually more expensive than the periphery. It's not always true. One thing you can count on, just like you have in North America, is that when you're living in the big city, generally, the cost of living is going to be more. So that's something to consider when looking at options. Also, proximity to employment is an important thing. If you're going to be working in Israel and you have to go into the office, depending on what job it is and where you're hoping to work, you may want to be able to look at a community that's in close proximity, so your commute is not going to be too difficult. Also, if you're coming with children, of course, you want to look at schools and any types of services that are available for your children. You want to make sure that you have the right resources, and you want to be able to research as much as possible, so that way you'll have the smoothest transition when you arrive. Also, a thing to think about is the percentage of English speakers and the English speaking services that are available in the community. Now, there are a lot of people that want to, when they're looking for communities, they want a community that has lots of English speakers so they can have what we call a soft landing. They can come and they can kind of ease into the country. They don't need as much Hebrew necessarily in the beginning. And guess what? That works. Some people say they'd rather go to a community where there's very little English speaking services. So that way they kind of like jump in, cold turkey, jump in the deep end. And guess what? That works also. So both of them work. It's just a question of what's best for you, and decide what is it that you're really looking for. But those are things that you may want to consider as well. The topography of the community, the climate. Israel is a small country, but there's a large diversity in terms of climate. We have desert climate. We have there are places that are more humid. There are places that are cooler, places that are hotter, and those are things you may want to consider when looking at communities. Keep in mind, of course, it is the Middle East, so chances are it's going to be hot, okay? But yet there are still going to be communities that may be cooler than others. There are communities that may be drier, others that'll be humid as well. The demographics within the community, you may want to consider, for example, are you looking for a community that is pretty much religiously homogeneous or heterogeneous? Are you looking for diversity within your community from a religious standpoint or from an age standpoint? Are you a young individual, young adult that's looking for other singles? Perhaps maybe you're a young family that's looking for a community that also has other young families. Likewise, maybe you're an empty nester or retiree that is looking for a community that has empty nesters and retirees. If these things are important to you, put it on your list, because those are going to be things that you'll look for in those communities. And finally, of course, the size of the community and the amenities that are available in the community. Some people want to be in the big city, which is great. They want to have all of those resources available to them. Some people hate city life. That's fine. And they may be looking for a small town type of a situation. That's wonderful. Some people may want to be outside the city, but be in close proximity, So that way they can have all of those amenities that the city provides, maybe have a little bit of a less in terms of how the costs of their housing. All of these things are important things to consider. So how do you research this? I gave you all these things to consider. Well, luckily on our website, we have lots of resources, and your Aliyah advisor will be able to guide you in this. We have a community profiles database where we highlight about 30 or so top communities. These are the ones that are the top picks, so to speak, when it comes to people making Aliyah. You don't have to go to those communities, but these are the ones that seem to be the most popular, and these are ones that also have what we call municipal Anglo liaisons. These are people employed by the local municipalities who are English speakers and are there to liaise with English-speaking Olim, so they can help you sometimes with information about the community. They can help you very often with schools for your kids, as far as information about registration, and just in general, they're a wonderful, wonderful resource to have. So all of these things, and there's plenty other resources as well to look up to search rentals, and there are also Facebook groups that will be able to guide you towards to be able to help research different communities and hopefully find the community that's going to be best for you. In all of these cases, I just want to throw out also, we always encourage people before they make Aliyah to plan what we call a pilot trip. And that's when you come to Israel, not to tour, but you're coming really on a journey. You're coming on a research trip. You're coming to actually check out communities that you've researched. If you're looking for employment, you maybe even speak to some employers. And if you have kids, research schools and go visit the schools. It's really to gain information. We always encourage to do that after you've done all of this basic research. Let's talk now a little bit about employment. What are those kind of things that you can do now and start looking into? Well, start thinking about what it is that you do now for a living, and more importantly, what is it that you can do? So for many people, we think about our professions based on a title. I'm an accountant, I am a author, I'm a this, I'm a that, whatever it might be, which is wonderful. But in Israel, very often, depending on the profession, the employer may be looking at not as much what you do, but what can you do? What types of skills do you have? What types of things have you done in the past? Because those types of things may be able to help you carve out a niche for yourself that'll make you much more desirable to an Israeli employer. And these are things to think about. Also, because you want to be somewhat flexible in what it is that you're doing. Sometimes, and these are things we can help you research, sometimes your profession may be in very high demand already in Israel, but sometimes your profession may be very specific, and you may want to look with some flexibility at other things that you can do that are somewhat tangential. And one of two things could hopefully happen. Either you'll circle back around to what it was that you were hoping to do, you'll at least get your foot into the door, as they say, or you may actually find some type of tangential profession which you actually never even knew you would have been interested in, you can be successful in. Now, how do you do this? Well, we have an employment department that can help you research the market and develop contacts and start developing your network, so you can already reach out to people in Israel and be able to start picking their brains and start having them look and keep their eyes open for opportunities for you. Reach out to our employment department at Nefesh B'Nefesh. You see the email address there on the screen, and see what types of services. We don't do job placement per se. I want to get the expectation correct. We don't do job placement, but we can help you with things like your resume. We help you with developing your network and your contact base, and help guide you in terms of those resources and skills you'll need in order to be able to land that first job in Israel. Also, license and degree registration is something we can help you with as well. Those in the medical profession, we have an entire department at Nefesh B'Nefesh called IMAP, which is the International Medical Aliyah Program, which assists those in the medical field with starting the process of having their licenses recognized already in Israel by the Ministry of Health. So that way, when you arrive in Israel, you can more quickly start working and have your license already recognized. So all of these things are available, and these are things you can already start researching through our resources on our website. And you can speak to your Aliyah advisor about it as well. How about education? If you're coming with children, this is going to be vital. You want to have a good understanding of the educational system in Israel. I'm not going to go through that with you now. We actually have webinars on that as well, and we have articles that you can read about about the educational system, and being able to research to find the right school for your children. Understanding also the differences that exist between schools in North America and schools in Israel. Now, they're neither good nor bad, they're just different. And it's important to appreciate the differences. So that way, when you're looking at schools, you know that you're comparing, as they say, apples to apples. You want to make sure that you understand, you have expectations of what it is that you're seeing. So you know to be able to find the right school and the best match for your children. Also, how to register. We have articles about that on our website as well. And as I made reference to before, very often, the municipal coordinator in the community in which you're going to be living can be very helpful in guiding you in that, but in that regard as well. And finally, to think about what types of benefits your children as Olim, as new immigrants, will be eligible for. And there are benefits that they may be eligible, or they should be eligible for from within the school system. I want to just mention at the outset also, or just mention in addition, that if there are any special services, any accommodations, modifications, any special needs, or any special types of additional services that any of your children may be receiving currently, it is vital that you research to make sure that whatever types of services are needed, that they are already going to be planned for, that they'll be available for you in Israel. Israel has wonderful, magnificent services, but just like in North America, there's a process involved in order to be able to be eligible for those things. And you want to make sure that those things are going to be addressed at the outset. What about healthcare? Healthcare is a very important thing to consider. Number one, to be able to understand the healthcare system. Now, I'm not going to go through the specifics of it because we do have also a wonderful webinar about the healthcare system. But understand that for those in the United States who recognize the terminology when we say an HMO, you'll understand that that's the type of system that the Israeli government healthcare system works. Those people from Canada are maybe familiar with the government healthcare system. The difference is that in Israel, the doctors and the resources that you receive under that healthcare come from specific networks. There are 4 companies. In Hebrew, they're called Kupot Cholim. Each company has its own network of doctors and clinics, and you're going to be choosing one of those 4 companies to be your health network through which you're going to get the health care that you pay the government for. Now, why is this important to consider in terms of Aliyah planning? First of all, because you want to be able to research the healthcare system if there's something that you currently receive. This I can't emphasize enough. If there's any health services, any ongoing medications or treatments or anything of that nature that anyone in the family is currently receiving, it is vital that you research to make sure that those services and resources are available for you in Israel and that they're covered. Now, the good thing is that there are resources able to do this, and your Aliyah advisor will guide you on that. Keep in mind also that there is something of a cultural adaptation, that there's a bit of a difference. There's a difference, as you know, even though Israel is a first world country, we're a westernized country, but there's a different cadence at which the country operates. And there's a different language, if you will, not just Hebrew, but there's a different way in which people are going to work. It's neither good nor bad. It's just different. And understand that coming into it. And sometimes you'll need to be resolute. You'll stand up a little bit, advocate for yourself for certain services that you are eligible for, but may not come immediately. So all of this, again, will be able to help you and assist you with. I want to encourage you that when you're speaking with your Aliyah advisor, please be as open and forthcoming with information related to planning, so that way we can provide for you the best services and resources so that nothing gets, we want to eliminate as many surprises as possible. Let's talk a little bit about finances very quickly. As far as how you'll be supporting yourself when you make Aliyah, it's important to budget, and it's important to take into account the cost of living in Israel. How do we do that? Of course, people know, well, I know what I make now, but what am I going to be making when I'm in Israel, and how do I know if that's going to suffice? We have wonderful resources on our website that your Aliyah advisor will guide you to. There's a wonderful spreadsheet that was developed for Nefesh B'Nefesh by a wealth management company and a financial advising company. It's an extensive spreadsheet with information you download, and you fill in all the information, and it will create for you a budget of what it'll take for the first year, based on the lifestyle that you live, and based on the lifestyle that you're expecting to have when you're in Israel. So take advantage of those resources. Look into employment opportunities. We have on our website, we host a job board. Now, maybe too soon to start looking for jobs, but if you can start looking and get an idea of what's available, at least in Israel, see if your profession is something that's in demand. Start reaching out to people and telling them that you're planning on making Aliyah, and that they should keep their eyes open for you as far as opportunities. Start looking into things like taxes, and understand whether that will impact in any way the income and the money that you will have available to you. Take an honest look at if you have money coming in from abroad when you make Aliyah. Will that be affected by your taxes? How will it be affected? And maybe you should even speak with a tax professional who knows the taxes from your country, but also from Israel. Those resources, again, can be provided to you by your Aliyah advisor. Keep in mind when you're talking about finances, lifestyle changes, that the reality, as we mentioned, is that Israel is a different country, and there are certain things that are different. One of those things, for example, is the size of apartments and houses. Generally speaking, in Israel, the apartments and the houses are more European style, and they're going to be smaller than the houses in North America. Again, that's neither good nor bad. It's just different. And it's something to come into understanding, so that way there's no disappointments and no surprises. Keep those things in mind, because that can affect, again, your expectations in terms of finances. Keep in mind the benefits that you're going to get from the state of Israel. We mentioned the Sal Klita and all the benefits. Keep those in mind. Put those into your spreadsheet so that you can know what you're going to have for the first year, over the first number of months and over the first year, and put that in together with your leveraging the amount of money that you're going to have and when you're going to be able to expect that first job to come along. Effectively, as you see at the bottom, your earning power, which means your assets and what you hope to make, or if you're already working, you'll be working remotely, whatever the case might be, all of that earning together minus the expenses, that determines what we call your Aliyah viability. Analyze it. Look at it. A lot of people are afraid to actually look at the numbers and assess it. I tell you that if you do it, you'll be able to come forward with from a position of power, because you'll have an understanding of what you have and what you'll need in order to be able to survive in Israel for the first year, for the first few years, and you may be happily surprised at what you're able to do. So finally, just to wrap up then, keep in mind that the resources are there. They're available for you. We are here at Nefesh B'Nefesh to assist you. As I mentioned, if you're within 12 months, if there's a chance of you making Aliyah within 12 months, submit that application so that way you can be assigned an Aliyah advisor who can guide you in this process. We have tons of resources on our YouTube channel. There are webinars there. You can research communities. You can lots and lots of information that's available. There are Facebook groups available that you can use and we can guide you to. There's one called Living Financially Smarter in Israel, which is moderated by a financial planner here in Israel, with that you can ask financial questions. For healthcare questions, there's a Facebook group called Navigate the Israeli Healthcare System. There are plenty of resources for special resources and things of that nature. Be forward in terms of what you need. Ask questions and you'll get those answers. And as we mentioned, know those Aliyah rights and know those Aliyah benefits. Now, as we started off, as we mentioned, You may be in a situation that you're looking somewhat down the road to make Aliyah, and I hope that this was informative for you. For some of you, you may be ready to go right away, and you're like, okay, let's get this thing started, and I'm really excited for you. Some of you may be looking maybe 12 to 24 months down the road. That's fantastic. Whatever your timeline is, I want to encourage you, reach out to us. Get the information you need. Get those resources because we're here to help. And in the right time, whenever that time is going to be, I look forward to be one of those people to be able to welcome you home with open arms here in Israel, God willing, in the right time. Thank you for the time. Thank you for your attention. I wish you bahatzlacha, good luck, and shalom.